many headlines, of course. How do you make protection of students, faculty, and staff from sexual harassment, discrimination, and assault a hardline priority for all institutions of the LSU system?
What an incredibly important question, because really there's nothing else that's more important than that. In fact, I mentioned that I just left an interview at LPB. I was with Interim President Galligan and Morgan Lamondre from STAR, and with Senator Mizell and with Senator Barrow, and we were talking about how universities can implement stronger Title IX policies and practices, and those are important. But I want to step back from that for just a minute, because Title IX is statute, it's federal law, it's regulatory. And it's insufficient for us to be compliant. You have to step beyond that and stop asking, are we doing the things we're required to do? And ask ourselves, are we doing the things we should do to protect students? I listened to some of the student testimony at the various Senate Select Committee on Women, and their testimony was compelling. It was raw. It was gut-wrenching. I've read the Hush Blackwell report. Gut-wrenching, I think, is the word. It hits you in a very visceral way. We cannot comply ourselves into the culture we should be in. So it takes a two-pronged approach. One, you have to be intolerant of violations of process. Your process has to be clear. We have in Louisiana a number of requirements. One is for training. There's the sexual harassment training, 1 hour that every person, every employee in the state of Louisiana has to take. It's good training. I don't dismiss it, but it's 1 hour. We had a report that came out in February that only 92% of the employees in the UL system had complied with that requirement, and I was livid. And when I talked to our university presidents, they too were livid. And we said, you know what, over the next 30 days, we're going to be at 100% compliance. And we're going to change the reporting system so that we know ahead of time, not only has the training been completed, but how is it impacting us as an organization? Now, I was a little surprised that we were actually one of the top performing entities in the state when it came to compliance with that. And that's unfortunate. So you establish an expectation that compliance is non-negotiable. And then you ensure that your policy environment starts and ends with the needs of the student, not the needs of the institution. You see, we approach Title IX, because it is a regulatory apparatus, with a risk management mentality instead of a student safety mentality. We've got to ensure that victims and claimants that come to us are treated with respect and empathy. There is a limit on how much support can be provided from Title IX officers themselves. But you have to have an apparatus within your university outside of that that is truly advocating for that victim and for that claimant, and providing them with the restorative work that needs to take place immediately, with the trauma intervention. And so you put these practices in place. And then you have to realize there's an old management maxim that called events plus response equals outcome. We're institutions of people, and we're institutions of flawed people, and they're going to make mistakes. And those are the events. We can't control that 100% of the time. We can reduce the occurrence of sexual violence, but we can't totally prevent it. When those events occur, what we can control is our response. And that response is what determines the ultimate outcome. And if we have outcomes that are defined in terms of meeting the needs of students and creating safe environments and responding first and foremost with the students' needs as the paramount concern, then we can affect cultural change that will improve the quality of life and the safety on all of our campuses around the state.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Ms. Barrios?
Yeah. Hey, good morning, Dr. Henderson.
Hey, good morning.
My question is, how would you ensure that LSU campuses remain student-centered? Please describe how you interact with and engage students, specifically in the area of fostering student success, and how do you incorporate student input and respond to their needs and concerns?
And thank you so much for that question. You're actually hitting on one of the reasons why I'm pursuing this opportunity, and it's that connection with students. I derive so much intrinsic value from the daily interactions with students, from this indescribable joy of going to a recruiting event and bringing a student to your institution and telling them all the great things that your institution stands for and what your institution is going to do for that student and what their experience is going to be like. Watching that student thrive in the collegiate environment, watching them become involved in leadership activities or social activities, watching them excel in the classroom, watch them engage in levels of research that they didn't think were possible as an undergraduate. And then that unparalleled joy of watching them walk across the stage at graduation. I used to take the graduation program before a ceremony, and I would read through the list. And inevitably, there would be 15, 20, maybe even up to 50 names that jumped out at me. Maybe it was a Holly Conway, right, who was Miss Louisiana, who had a starring role in the production of Rent, who now stars, by the way, as Tina on Broadway. Maybe it was one of those students. Or maybe it was a student that had a question about where to go for the first day of class, and that name jumps out at you. And you think, wow, I can't wait to see them come across the stage. And then as we start that parade of graduating students and you get to look in the faces and you say, wait a second, I remember this student because I almost bumped into him coming out of a classroom too fast. I was late for a meeting. I remember this student in an article they wrote for the student newspaper, or a research presentation at an academic honors day from this particular student. And then you realize it's hundreds of stories that make up your work. Again, you can't describe how much joy comes from that interaction. At the same time, I love the daily back and forth. You know, when you look at traditional students, the current generation of students is extraordinarily thoughtful. And some people say it in a way that means to be, and not taken in a positive way, but you're woke, right? You're woke more about some of the things that get disparaged. You're woke about life in general. And you approach life with this sense of community and this sense of purpose and this sense of dream that is inspiring to me. And I love connecting with students. I love social media. I'm on Twitter. I think if you're going to be connecting with students, you have to be accessible to students. And so Twitter is probably my favorite platform. Some of the newer ones, I am getting a little older. It's a little harder to take that up. But I interact with students quite often. In fact, if it's going to snow, I'll start getting Twitter messages that say, hey, when are you canceling classes? And so, that just leads to a bunch of interactions. Students know they can reach out to me at any time. I have a true 24/7 open door policy. There's a cell phone number on my Facebook profile that is my cell phone number. That matters, being accessible. And then that other piece I mentioned is being present. I can't tell you the number of times that I have uncovered issues or challenges or potential at a university just by being present and engaging in a conversation with students. Data matters, right? And you have to have data-informed decisions, especially when it comes to student success, so that you have early interventions when you uncover a problem that the data supports. But the data isn't human. Students are human beings. And so that daily connection with them and ensuring that you're in touch with number one, where they are, and maybe even more importantly, where they want to be, is absolutely critical to the success of the university. I hope that's fair.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Mitchell?
Sure. How you doing this morning, Dr. Henderson?
I'm doing well, sir. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, and your Twitter presence is impressive. Beautiful grandchildren.
Oh,
Beautiful.
You know what? My wife would be with me, but she is babysitting in Dallas right now. And folks, if you don't know, I have 2 3-week-old twin grandbabies, Maria Therese and Miguel Clement. And they have a 1-year-old older brother, Zachary Joseph. So Tanya is babysitting and has been for about 2 months now.
So, well, tell us, how would you approach leading and working with faculty? What are your views on faculty governance? Please describe your previous experience in leading, supporting, and or growing research and scholarly activity through your work with the faculty?
Dr. Mitchell, you've hit on the other prong of the two-prong impetus for me seeking this, and that's the daily interaction with faculty. I love working with faculty. They're thought leaders, they're provocative, they're engaging, they have great stories to tell, they're answering a calling. And so that interaction, that intellectual interaction and the social interaction with faculty is again a great source of joy for me. Now, specifically shared governance, that it's essential in a complex higher education environment. Shared governance is more than just having a voice or having a faculty senate that can make a vote or recommendation. It's about a two-way street, right? It's engaging faculty by being very, very transparent in your approach to the work. You know, not just saying this is what we're going to do, but answering the question why we're going to do this. Developing a level of trust. When I was at Northwestern State, I would send a weekly email to the whole campus community, just describing some issues of the day, and sometimes they were of significant import. Sometimes they were much less of that. And then describing what my week was, and not every minute, but maybe the things that I thought that faculty might would be interested in. And then inviting them to weigh in on if they read something that, you know, that didn't make sense, you know, email me or call me or text me and say, hey, listen, I saw this in your report. I didn't quite understand what you're talking about here. And so that daily interaction is absolutely key. And then I also like to engage faculty in an ad hoc basis. I was interviewing for the presidency at Northwestern State. And a faculty member who I remembered from my days as an undergraduate, so he wasn't the youngest faculty member in the room. He'd been there for some time. And he went on a rant, an epic rant about some budgetary decisions that had been made at the university. And he won't mind me saying, so I called Ben after I got into the office and said, listen, I'm putting together a task force, an ad hoc task force on a strategic budgeting initiative. And he says, well, great, I'm glad to hear that. And I said, you're the chair of it. And there was silence, and maybe the longest period of silence that Ben has ever suffered through. And I put together a committee of faculty, and our CFO was on it, but the CFO was not the leader in the room. It was led by faculty. I put the institutional effectiveness gurus on this committee. I brought in an economist who was very soft-spoken, unless he was speaking in Russian, a person who had been on the World Bank board, who had some experiences in finance and add richness, intellectual richness to the conversation. After the third meeting, Marcus Jones, who was just named the interim president at Northwestern State, I had put him on the committee. He called me and says, Doc, this is not working, man. We're arguing, we're debating, we're not making any progress. I said, well, give it 2 more meetings. By the end of about 6 more meetings, they came out with what I think is one of the most innovative budgeting transparency documents that exist in higher education. It's one that informs our decision-making on how we allocate budgets based on the purpose of the institution and the priorities of the institution. There's an old saying, if you show me your budget, I'll show you what your priorities are. And it added a level of transparency that resulted in trust. Right? I also developed diverse teams and bring teams to the table that think differently about the different aspects of a particular incident. And sometimes it's teams that aren't diverse. Maybe it's homogenous teams because it's an incident or instance that is so specific that you really need to dig down deep into why this incident is affecting certain populations. And we had there was a piece of legislation that had been filed that was especially, that seemed a little problematic. And just this last week, I had faculty join me on Zoom from 4 different institutions that had never met. A couple of them had never met me. And I just laid out a proposition and I said, now I'm going to sit back and I'm going to listen to a conversation. You can learn so much from faculty, but they need our support and they need our leadership. And so we created at our system the For Our Future Conference, which is an annual conference of 9 institutions coming together to share research findings, to share scholarly activities, to share maybe new techniques in teaching in an online environment, or maybe more effective ways to teach in hybrid environments, or more effective ways to teach in traditional environments. Guess what? We still teach in traditional environments sometimes. We created networks of subject matter experts from various disciplines on different operations in the organization. And then we invest in professional development, and that's got to be key. People often say that if you invest in the development of your people, they're going to leave you. And I said, well, what if you don't invest in the development of your people and they stay? That's more problematic, right? If we're going to have world-class faculty, we have to recruit world-class faculty. We have to retain world-class faculty, but we have to develop world-class faculty. And professional development, and this is unfortunate, that when we went through an 8-year cataclysmic disinvestment of state resources in higher education, one of the first things that we cut was professional development for faculty. That's a mistake. It's one that's going to take us a long time to overcome, but I'm here for it, and we're gonna make that work. So, Dr. Mitchell, thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clark?
Thank you. Dr. Henderson.
Dr. Clark, it's good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, sir. In a time of limited and even shrinking resources, budgeting and resources allocations and important responsibilities, budget cuts to higher education have resulted in many unfilled